Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Councillor Kelly. I'll be chair of tonight's licensing committee, Thursday the 10th of June. And welcome. There'll be people patching in as we go along. Obviously, this is a newly constituted committee, so there's some new members and they're very welcome. I'd just like to say thanks to councillors Manro, Donnelly, Costigan and Councillor Kumar for their work on the committee. And I'd like to welcome newly elected Councillor Gallant, the return of Councillor Padda, welcome to Councillor Anjum, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Conlon, Councillor Rye, and I believe that's everybody. If I missed you, I apologise. It might be worthwhile, as we've got new members, welcome Councillor Shaw, as we've got new members, it might be worth, just before we start, for the officers to introduce themselves and explain how they figure in the hierarchy of the licensing committee and the subcommittees. Having said that, we do have training coming up, so be brief. That'd be great. So, Alison. Alison, do you want to just introduce yourself, so to speak?
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having real problems with. I'm Alison Nuff. I work in the legal team, and I'm legal advisor to the licensing subcommittee. Thanks.
And Alison's has a colleague, Hattie Zeb, who's also fills that role, and we have Cornelia Harden. She's Democratic Services Office and does most, clerks most of the meetings. We have other clerks as well, but she's the go-to clerk. So if we could perhaps confirm the minutes of the 21st of January 21. Obviously, many of you weren't there, but do we have any matters of correction? Thank you very much, Councillor Sumner. Anybody want to make any amendments? No. That's fine. Thank you very much. Apologies I have received apologies from Councillor Block. I have not received apologies from anybody else.
Chair, if I could just say, Cornelia here, I haven't received any apologies either.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the substantive, so just how it works today, Joe is going to present the report. And then, actually, no, hang on. I beg your pardon. Do we do Sergeant Edwards first and the meetings, or do we do your report first? What would you suggest, Joe and Sergeant Edwards?
I'm happy to do my report, Graham, if you'd like to sort of supplement that once I've gone through that, if that's okay.
Yes, to be honest, I haven't seen your report, Joe. It's very comprehensive, and I think most of what you're going to say, I would just be repeating. So yes, please carry on.
That sounds good. So yeah, Joe, obviously, yeah, perhaps wait till at the end to ask questions, but if there's something really, really pressing, please indicate that you want to speak. Thanks very much, Joe.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Good evening, councillors. So the report today is a licensing enforcement update. So what I've done is I've summarised the activity that the licensing team at the council have carried out in 2020 to 21, that financial year, and I've then given an outline of our planned activities for this financial year. The report is made up really of 6 appendices which go into quite a lot of detail about where we've carried out work and what the activities have been. So if the committee are happy, I will just summarise basically what each appendix shows. So Appendix 1 and 2, they're part of the good practice recommendation that the licensing committee will get a performance update on the decisions of the committee. So Appendix 1 is probably the most useful, and that just summarises the hearings and the decisions that were carried out under the Licensing Act 2003 in last financial year. So we had 8 new premises. Apologies. I should start at the beginning by saying, for those that are yet to be familiar, when we receive a licensing application, only if we receive representations about that application will that application be heard by the committee. In all other cases where there are no representations made, then officers have delegated authority to then grant that license. So although we only heard 8 new premises licenses last financial year, we received over 41. So the other 33 applications didn't attract any representations from any of the responsible authorities, or indeed any other parties or interested parties such as residents or residents associations, etc. So 8 new premises licenses were heard by committee last year. 6 were granted, and in some of those cases they were granted but with additional conditions imposed by the committee, and 2 were refused. 5 applications to vary a premises license were received, 2 were granted and 3 were refused. In terms of applications for review, there were 10 applications for review of a premises license made, and out of those 10, 6 were revoked and 4 were suspended. And last year there were 3 summary reviews of a premises license, or expedited reviews. So those are the applications made by the police in the case of any serious crime and disorder. And so there were 3 of those last year. And in each case, the committee decided as an interim step to suspend the license until there was a full hearing. So that summary, I hope you find useful. Then we move on to Appendix 3 and onwards. So this is just a summary of the activity carried out by the licensing processing team and how many applications they've processed. There are obvious issues that we experienced last financial year in terms of COVID. So while the biggest difference really between the last financial year and the previous year was that we received much fewer temporary event notice applications. So they'd reduced from 665 applications in the financial year 19 to 20 to 112 last year. But that's totally understandable considering most types of events were actually prohibited due to COVID restrictions. One other interesting aspect as well was that we had almost double the amount of new premises license applications last financial year. These were a variation of turnover of businesses, so new people taking over businesses and then wanting to offer licensable activities, or new types of businesses opening. So we did have a few applications, for example, from people that wanted to do some kind of alcohol delivery service, which requires a license, but would often not attract representations because they were carried out from storage units, etc. So that was quite a significant increase, really, in new premises license applications. Then Appendix 4 goes into details about the licensing, compliance and enforcement activity. So this is effectively our proactive programme of work that we'll carry out. There is obviously a day-to-day business as usual type of work that we do, responding to complaints, responding to service requests that are carried out that aren't detailed in this kind of plan. This plan is really a programme that officers will refer to in the activities they're going to carry out. So again, last financial year, significant sectors of the licensed premises demographic were actually closed, but around 50% of our licensed premises are off licenses, convenience stores and supermarkets, and they've been permitted to trade throughout. So these premises have been receiving, as usual, their proactive licensing inspections, and our licensing officers work closely with our trading standards officers, and I think many are familiar with the issues that we experience with illicit tobacco or alcohol. So that might be counterfeit or duty unpaid. products, and Appendix 5 gives details of all of the seizures that were carried out from licensed premises during that time. So licensing officers during the COVID pandemic, they were working on COVID enforcement work, but they were also carrying out their kind of business as usual core work of inspecting those type of premises. Then in Appendix 6, what I've done is outlined our proposed proactive licensing activities for the year to come. So this includes specific enforcement and activities around the Licensing Act and the Gambling Act. There are also some areas where we're going to join up with other teams. So for example, some of our age restricted test purchases will join up with trading standards. So we'll be testing premises to see whether they will sell alcohol to minors or cigarettes, and the outcomes of those will be dependent really on the how egregious the wrongdoing is, if they've had previous warnings, etc. So if it's okay, as I've kind of run through that, what I'd like to do is just discuss Appendix 6, because that's probably most pertinent, because that's what we're going to be delivering. We've already started delivering some of it, because we generally plan our work around financial years, and I'll just talk about the areas where we're looking to focus. So some of them are quite familiar, and we do them every year. So General Licensing Act compliance. So that will be visits to premises where we may have received complaints or intelligence about them. That will be including assessing whether they're complying with the license conditions. We'll also be focusing some of those visits on our off licenses and other licensed premises in our special policy areas, again to promote our licensing policy, and that those areas were adopted in our policy 2020. Another aspect we're looking at is the collection of fees. There are some premises with I think what you term bad debt, as in they haven't paid their licensing fees for a while, and there is some outstanding debt. Now, as a licensing authority, if a premises hasn't paid their license fees, we're obliged to consider suspending their license. While this is on the work programme, it was on last year's work programme, but it with the economic harm that's been caused by COVID, there wasn't really the political imperative to chase that bad debt with premises. So this year we'll be considering starting that work, but I have to say we're not thinking of doing it right now with a lot of the COVID restrictions up in the air. But I would expect to be able to report back on this time next year, when hopefully I come back to the committee and report on and evaluate our success against this work plan proposed for this coming financial year. We'll be doing our fireworks storage inspections. We'll be checking Gambling Act compliance. Again, this gambling premises and betting shops were quite significantly affected by COVID restrictions, so we weren't able to do that last year. And I would also like to do that so we can evaluate our gambling policy and report back again to the committee. We have our animal welfare and licensing regime going on. Additional things with the Gambling Act and the Licensing Act in reference to gaming machines and making sure that our gambling license conditions are being complied with. Our massage and special treatments licensing regime carries on, and I would just like to say as well, thanks very much to the committee who adopted some new standard conditions about 4 months ago. That's been really useful in dealing with premises and encouraging compliance. And I know that a lot of our massage and special treatment premises have actually welcomed renewed conditions that allow them some certainty that they're trading safely, and it's been very useful to our officers as well to set a really consistent benchmark. We're now much more consistent with other London boroughs, so that's been very welcome. So moving on to a couple of projects where we'll be working together with trading standards. So again, focused on massage and special treatment premises, we'll be hoping to take part in the London Trading Standards Consumer Week, where we'll be looking at things like teeth whitening products and other products that shouldn't be sold to consumers. They're only for professional use. So this will be joint inspections between licensing officers and trading standards officers to assess what products are on sale, whether they need to be seized. And we'll also consider if there needs to be any kind of licensing enforcement around the license that they've been granted. We'll be doing age-restricted test purchases. So again, with trading standards, testing whether licensed premises are likely to sell alcohol or indeed tobacco to children. And we're particularly interested around the protection of children from harm licensing objective. So that's the proactive program plan. Again, I've said it before, but I'll just repeat that obviously that's a proactive program. We're also a reactive service. So as and when we get notified of concerns about licensed premises or potential breaches of conditions, we will carry out those visits in line with our normal service standards. So this is really proactive work, but we also have our reactive service, and dependent on how busy that is, we'll kind of reflect on how far we progress with our proactive program. I've run through that quite quickly, but I've gone heavy on a lot of the information in the appendices, so I don't know whether to apologise for that, but I think that's the best way of giving this sort of information to the committee. I'm happy to pause to stop for questions there, Councillor Kelly, if that's all right. The final thing I would say is at the pre-meeting agenda, there was a request for me to just quickly run through COVID-19 and the enforcement response about licensing. I've prepared a quick presentation on that, which I'm happy to do perhaps afterwards, once I've taken questions, and Graham can maybe chip in and help me answer them. Thanks very much.
Okay, that's thank you very much, Joe. John has got a question. I hope it's not going to be COVID, because hopefully you'll cover that later. But John has still got his hand up. So, Councillor Ball.
Yeah. So, well, two questions, if that's all right. So the first one's about the explosives storage licenses in Appendix 3 and 3A. Is that purely fireworks, or do you also cover kind of industrial fireworks and pyrotechnics and things?
No, sorry. Yeah, it is just fireworks storage. So yeah, it's not it's that kind of fireworks. It's not like a health and safety. I know what you mean. It's not that kind of explosive stuff. No.
Okay. And the other one was the Appendix 5, the seizures. I know there weren't any seizures in W5. Does that mean that all the premises in W5 are run by Saints, or is there any kind of is there any less test purchases and so on in W5 than in the other areas?
Probably less off licenses.
Yeah, that's
plenty of off licenses in W5.
There is a few, but not in comparative to the others. But anyway, this for Joe to answer. Beg your pardon.
Yeah, no, that's right. No, thanks, Councillor Ball. No, we do carry out visits to those in W5. It's just we haven't uncovered illicit alcohol and tobacco there. I think that's a good point. I should perhaps when I provide that information. Yeah, I mean, in regulatory services, we don't often make a long note of premises which are good. If they're good, we're in and out of the door and we've forgotten about them. But maybe next year I should provide maybe some sort of map showing where we've done visits. As you know, the officers, if there is illicit alcohol and tobacco, I'm supremely confident they'll find it in those premises. But no, we do. I mean, the other thing I would say is we respond to local intelligence as well. That generates a lot of where we do our inspections, and yeah, but we are careful to make sure we don't miss out areas just because we're not getting the complaints, etc.
Great, thank you.
Just while we're going through the seizure reasons, could you explain to me what duty diverted is as opposed to non-duty paid? Joe? You're muted at the moment.
Apologies, I've got too many windows open. No, I have to say I'm not entirely sure what duty diverted as opposed to duty paid is. I think there may be a suggestion that duty would have been paid if the if the products had come through an appropriate border inspection post. But I can come back to you on that. Apologies.
Yeah, it's not pressing. You can let us know. Councillor Gallant has indicated.
Yes, thank you very much, Joe, for taking this newbie councillor through your report, and congratulations for what you've done. The question is, have you got enough staff? Are you, I mean, this huge work, are you well enough staffed, or are you frustrated at all that you can't do what you want to do?
Don't we make, yeah, I mean, that might be a good opportunity, Joe. I was going to ask you if you could explain perhaps the team that you lead, and, you know, how many are in it, who does what, and who goes out on the road and who doesn't go out on the road.
Thanks. Yeah. So we have, so the licensing team is we actually have two teams. So we've got one which is the processing team, and they will process all of the applications, and they're purposefully kept separate to the licensing compliance team, because as the licensing authority, we're obliged to remain neutral in terms of applications. We just process them, and then other authorities such as the police or the noise team will make representations. Then we have our licensing compliance team. So these are the officers that, upon receipt of an application, say for I might just have to go and sort something out. Hold on a second.
Chair, Councillor Kelly, might that be a good time? But maybe
you can fill the void there, I'm sure, for a few moments. Thank you.